and welcome. My name is Alexander Kyiv and you are watching Head to Head on UATV. The ongoing conflict in eastern Ukraine and the harsh winter conditions leaves about 4 million people near the front line in desperate need of humanitarian help. While Ukraine is facing a potential humanitarian disaster, what does the government plan to do to help the vulnerables out there? Joining us in the studio today to discuss this topic is Yuriy Ruman, Head of Department for Humanitarian Policy at the Presidential Administration. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So for my first question would be how to, and it's a paradox and a complicated topic, but how to sustain the needs of the vulnerable population in now occupied territories while being at war with Russian-backed separatists?
When we are speaking about the urgent needs of the people on the eastern Ukraine, in the territories that were affected by this Russian aggression, first of all, let me emphasize that there is a big difference between the situation, for example, on Ukrainian-controlled territories and the territories which are under Russian occupation. Of course, it's possible, for example, even to compare the situation in Mariupol or situation in Donetsk. That's a big difference. This is the first point. The second point, I would mention that, of course, the best way to help these people, to supply them with, let me say, all necessary or even urgent needs, again, of course, is the ceasefire. And because situation somewhere in Avdiivka, in other regions, when the situation is sometimes starts to be really catastrophic or disastrous because of different kind of breaks of elementary water supply, electricity supplies.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's a real tragedy, especially in winter. By the way, in summer it's not easier, but in winter when thousands of people find themselves out of electricity supply, water supply, and everything, of heat, of course, and everything else. So the first point, I would say that ceasefire. Let me again remind that the first point of so-called Minsk agreement, which I guess a lot of time discussed in this studio, in all studios in Ukraine. Again, the first point of Minsk agreement is ceasefire. Then coming from ceasefire to long-term negotiations and so it's the urgent need for this humanitarian progress, I would say, in these regions is again the possibility is to stop ceasefire, in order to
work on
missions.
infrastructure and to make them sustainable.
Infrastructure is, of course, is the first point, but the second point is simply to guarantee the safety of different missions, I mean governmental missions, and of course different USAID, Red Cross, all other missions, to give them opportunity to get to these people. Again, because this is there are a lot of possibilities. For example, I guess you can mention about, for example, the supply of medical help, medicines, food,
urgent needs in general.
But again, it's very difficult to organize the supply under the fire, and that's the big problem. Of course, there is a problem of, if we are speaking about, for example, about the people on the other side of front line, I would mention, of course, there is a huge, I would say, a huge package of these problems and urgent needs. First of all, of course, this is the consequences of economical disasters. I mean this dismantling of the breaking of all economic ties, even dismantling, I would mention, of the coal mines, of the plants, factories, and so on.
Of course, but and that's I understand the economic intrication of such problems. But let's come back to civilians for a moment, because these are the most touched by this, concerned by these problems. People, civilians who stay there, are either way vulnerable, either way elderly or young people, or people who can not necessarily move. How to ensure that these people may be out of the front line, and then on the other side also don't feel, and sometimes also in Ukrainian-controlled territories, because there is also some sort of, after 4 years, war fatigue. How to ensure these citizens don't feel forgotten? How to ensure they don't feel like second zone citizen? How to make them live again into humanitarian?
Well, it's a difficult question, of course, because it's difficult for me or for you or for any people to be on their place. Of course, after 4 years of such a tragical experience, that's something that changed the life forever, I guess. So in this situation, we cannot, I guess we cannot make them to forget, for example, all this experience, all these years. Let me say that they are I don't mean in how to say, not to be offensive, but again, they have the very special experience, and I would say that there are no general recipe for all these people with all different destinies. Of course, there are different social stratification. If we speak, of course, for example, if we speak about older people, for example, like seniors and so on, so this is one approach. Of course, we must guarantee for them the medical, the pensions, and so on. On Ukrainian territory, it is being done, but it's much more complicated on their side, of course. If we are speaking, for example, then again, it's then difficult question, but again, it's for example, for young people, for children, it's education, to make it possible for them to get education, not to interrupt educational process, because again, it's fundamental for their chances in the future life and so on. They must not feel themselves abandoned or abolished from Ukrainian educational process and so on. As if we are speaking about people in middle age, of course, the first social question is the work, the jobs for these people.
Yeah, for them to sustain themselves.
Of course, for their families, because it's not only economical problem, as you mentioned. It's all a huge social problem, psychological problem. There are different dimensions of the same problem, and so what we need again is to guarantee the jobs for these people, to find them. Of course, it's not so easy, because in this territory it's very difficult speaking, for example, about any investments. For example,
because it's obviously investors don't necessarily want to go into a
so this the problem. Some of them, for example, move themselves to Ukraine, much more Western. We know the biggest number of such temporary, how to say this, temporary displaced person.
IDPs.
They are in the nearby Dnipropetrovsk, in Kharkiv region and Zaporizhia and so on. It's additional, let me say, problem for infrastructure, for economical situation. But I guess we already accumulated some experience, and we feel, as speaking with these people, with the different people, again, helping them to solve their problems, I feel that now it's not 2014. Now, for 4 years, the situation have been changed, and I hope again it's of course these people are in. If we are speaking about displaced person, temporarily displaced, they again, let us understand that they are making the difficult choice. True. For example, to integrate them into new communities, or to live looking how to come back.
That's true, and it's interesting that you raised up the problem of IDPs, because when they come from eastern Ukraine and they arrive in Kyiv, it's not an easy situation for them, of course. Is there a coherent, settled strategy, like, I don't know, social benefits or pensions, or even structure to help them reintegrate Ukrainian society? Most of the IDP don't necessarily have the means to live, for example, in the center of Kiev, so they're going to live in the outskirts of Kiev, where it's complicated to integrate into the heart of Kiev itself. So is there any government structure to help them in that case?
Yeah, sure. Let me say, of course, of course, there is governmental structure. I would mention Ministry of the Temporarily Occupied Territories. Now, after adoption of this law of the specific of let me call it briefly reintegration. So,
because
it's
the
very complicated name. Okay, so after adoption of this law, they will it will be a bit easier for them to classify these people and to help them. But again, if we are speaking about these people, again, let us understand that there are no such totality of, for example, in this displaced person. There are different people with the different, let me say, social position,
and stories,
qualification, and so on. So I guess the aim of course, and this, it must be done, and it takes time, I guess, to adopt the governmental policy, but it must be done, first of all, to help the people in the most need. I mean, let me say, the poorest people, the people with the
without qualification,
specific demand, low qualification, let me say, with different illnesses and so on. So that's the point. This is the first aim to help these people. I guess, again, after 3 years, more or less urgent problem with these people, no, I don't think that it's possible to say that this problem have been solved. It's too optimistic. Don't be so over-optimistic, yeah? But I guess now the situation is not that as it was in 2014, when these people in some lived in winter in some temporary, temporarily adopted places, buildings, and so on. Now it's much better, but again, of course, it's not so easy. And here I would mention, of course, the big support from the international organization and Ukrainian donors. There were even specific
volunteers also. Of course.
Have been built, So that's the huge support. But again, I hope that the correct focus of the governmental policy and support of international donors will help for further support of these people.
Now the idea of international international donors. Now, recently, unfortunately, the World Food Programme announced that because of due to a lack of funds, it will stop helping in Eastern Ukraine, the population in Eastern Ukraine. There has been a loan recently given to Ukraine to help with this problem, but in the meantime, the US will cut more or less 80% of its help to Ukraine, and Ukraine is still heavily relying on the IMF loans and on international donors. What kind of strategy does Ukraine have not to rely completely on external aid when it comes to help its own population?
First of all, if we are speaking about the support from for example, IMF or so on, it's not the support again. It's the support for, of course, for central bank, and it's not for, let me say, it's macroeconomical. It's for support for macroeconomical figures. It's a very specific issue, of course, and it's not the issue of immediate or direct help for these people.
I was speaking more in general of this idea of that funds allocated in general to Ukraine might one day decrease because of many factors. Once and again, because of many factors. And it might be a problem. So how does Ukraine plan to sustain at one point?
No, let me say in such a way that I guess that it's my estimation. I don't want to be again over optimistic, or let me say I don't want to diminish the support from our friends from foreign donors. But again, the heaviest burden of the support of all this conflict and the heaviest burden of the support of people in this area, of course, are on the shoulders of Ukrainian state. That's the fact, and it's possible to illustrate this statement with different figures. Again, the social support, the economical support, pensions, wages, jobs, so mostly it is being done by a Ukrainian government.
But the Ukrainian government does receive money.
Sure, and that's again a big thanks for all this. We really appreciate this help from our donors, and again, we cannot, of course, we cannot. We cannot make decisions, for example, instead of them. But again, I feel that it's necessary again and again, for example, to stress, to emphasize that about the urgent need of this support. And of course, there are different political, of course, I guess, different political processes and sometimes economy measures for foreign governments, for foreign international organizations. But again, I hope that the support of for the people in the most need. I mean, as we mentioned,
the more vulnerable, as we said,
children. I guess I hope that UNICEF, for example, programs would not be cut.
But it might be, because due to a lack of fund, it might be.
Okay, again, I guess that Ukrainian diplomacy will again and again appeal to the governments, to the different funds, and not only governmental but private funds, in order to support Ukraine, because again it's really urgent need, and it's really huge conflict. We are speaking about, for example, maybe million displaced persons. We are speaking about a lot of families that lost their parents, or, for example, members, and so it's a real, real disaster.
Thank you for being with us. It was a pleasure to have you in the studio. That was Yuriy Ruman, Head of Department for Humanitarian Policy at Presidential Administration. Thank you for watching the program. Stay tuned for the rest.